to Books to Die For. I'm Gail Rubin, the Doyenne of Death, and very happy to be interviewing Dr. Jeff Spiess, who is the author of this book, Dying with Ease. Hello, Dr. Spiess.
Hello, how are you, Gail? It's good to talk to
Great.
you today.
I understand you're in Ohio.
Right, we're in Cleveland on the North Coast, and it's a little chilly in January. And just for your viewers, we've got a big construction project going in our house, and they ended up being considerably noisier than I thought they would be today. So I'm in the backyard, but it's great.
Well, you look all bundled up, and I hope you stay warm for
I'm
this.
fine. I'm just fine.
Great.
As the Scandinavians say, there's no bad weather, only bad clothes.
Exactly. There you go. So your background is as a doctor, as an oncologist, and
Right,
as a palliative care doctor.
right.
Could you talk a little bit about career?
Sure. So I started practicing oncology in the mid 1980s, and I got into the field because of science and just fascination with the disease processes. I stayed in the field because of cancer patients. The working with getting to know and learning from these people who were going through life-threatening, um, horrible diseases, uh, and I learned so much from them. For me, taking care of cancer patients meant taking care of them till the end, and so I started volunteering for a local hospice agency as a part-time volunteer medical director. That interest grew. I was able to transition my career about 2001 when an opening for an academic palliative care doctor at the University of Iowa became available. And so I shifted gears then. And then since 2005, was totally focused on hospice care as a hospice medical director here in Cleveland. So that's the quick and dirty biography thing. Okay.
So what made you want to write this book, Dying with Ease?
So I think the short answer is that I had learned so much from my patients and saw so much what I thought was unnecessary distress and suffering. And I just had learned so much from my patients about how that didn't need to be. And that if I'm convinced that one of the big reasons we don't do this well in this country, and I know this dovetails a bit with a lot that you have to say, is that we don't recognize that we are mortal, and and I think that if and that's for all of us. I think the docs are probably worse at it than a lot of other people because you know, and I think if we recognize that we were mortal, that we were going to die, that the most common cause of death is being alive, that we would make better choices, not only for planning the end of our lives, which is vital, but also that can inform the rest of our lives. One thing the dying taught me, some of them actually articulated it, was that learning how to die was teaching them how to live. And they were sad that they were only learning this just then. So that was kind of what I had learned, and I hope I was able to communicate a little bit of it in the book.
Well, absolutely. In fact, I had highlighted one of the passages toward the end of the book in your chapter, What's It All About Anyway, which
Yes.
said that knowing that we will die can instruct us in how to live well, and living well increases the likelihood of dying well. I think that's very profound.
Well, thank you. And I think it's also very true. I think it's absolutely essentially true. Yes.
So you go through the history of hospice, which is fascinating in the book. Can you give folks just a brief tour de force of
Sure.
where hospice comes from? Yeah.
Where hospice comes from? Well, the hospice concept the word goes back millennia. Um, Hospices were way stations along pilgrimage routes, or often run by religious orders. But but the modern hospice concept dates from 1967. Dame Cecily Saunders, the patron saint of all things hospice, a remarkable woman who was trained as a social worker, then as a nurse, and then realized that if she was going to change anything, she had to become a doctor. She recognized that there was so much unnecessary suffering, and especially pain. Physical pain was her thing, that she really devised a whole new way of caring for the dying. She articulated the concept of total pain, that people were suffering not only with physical pain, but with their mental anguish and their relational issues and financial issues and their spiritual pain, and that all of those needed to be addressed simultaneously. So she came up with a model of care, and that is the model that is hospice care today. In the United States, the first hospices were in the 70s, but what became kind of official hospice in the United States dates from the early 1980s with the Medicare Hospice Act that established a benefit, and then with that benefit, the regulations for how hospice is carried out. So that's kind of the history. So when people think about hospice, often they think about a place, uh, but it's really a model of care that addresses the patient and their family and all their needs as best as possible in wherever home is. If that's in their home, if that's in a nursing home, and so, if that's in a hospital, or if that needs to be in an inpatient hospice unit.
Which are not very common. More often, the model is your loved ones are helping to take care of you at home, and I think a lot of people don't realize that.
That is the model, and that's the way it was set up. But when Congress passed the act, um, and yes, inpatient hospices for a while they were proliferating because it was great. It was home-like places for people to live their last periods of their life, but the regulations have made that tougher. So now inpatient hospice units are more, what would I call them, hospice intensive care units, where people go when symptoms are out of control. Sometimes that's at the very end of their lives. And there are also way stations for people coming out of the hospital because, as we all know, getting discharged from the hospital sometimes happens fast and before we think we're ready. And this provides a little way station for people to get things set up at home, set up to continue the care. Yes, yeah,
One of the other things that you detail very well is about the idea of patient autonomy
yeah.
and talking about medical aid in dying. And I think those two are tied together rather
They are.
closely.
They are.
Karen Ann Quinlan and Teri Shiavo's cases. Just talk a little bit about those and
They were informative, and the Teri. I mean, the Quinlan case and the Nancy Cruzan case, I knew about kind of peripherally reading the news and kind of following them. The Teri Shiavo case in the early 2000s happened when I was director of a palliative care unit. And I remember being interviewed by newspapers and things. I was at a performance and was actually uh, coincidentally sitting next to our local congressman. So during the interval, we had little conversations about what was happening there. But I think that that those cases demonstrated how badly things can go wrong if the autonomy of the person is not respected. Um, and there's no absolute magic bullet. Living wills, durable powers of attorney for healthcare, having the good conversations with your surrogate decision maker, those are vital and help ensure that what you want will happen. But sometimes life intervenes or death intervenes and changes and changes things. Um, the medical aid in dying question is such an interesting question. And I know we could go for 3 hours here on that, and I'm not going to. But it is tied in with autonomy. And um, one of the things that I think is really reassuring, uh, because when this kind of became an issue, I was kind of really pretty against it. I thought this is not what medicine is about. Now I'm absolutely convinced that this needs to be available as an option for some people. If and I think the Oregon experience of over 20 years has shown that all the worries about slippery slopes, about somebody deciding that grandma's not worth keeping around anymore, um, the death panels that got talked about X years ago, just are not happening. It's if a well-designed program, it respects people being able to live their lives the way they want to. One thing that's fascinating to me about the medical aid in dying issues is that is the number of people who get the prescription but don't use it because they know that, okay, if I have to, I can do it, but I can decide when that's okay. And I haven't decided that yet. And that is tremendous autonomy, to know that I can continue to live today and this day is good for me. I'm sorry, I'm kind of rambling here, Gail, but that's kind of what I do.
That's okay. You know, one of the things that you put in your book, Dying with Ease,
Thank
is
you.
a a thought experiment
Oh,
about
yes.
what it's like to die. And you started with a 50-some-year-old man who's on vacation with his wife in New Mexico, which is where
Right.
I
Where
live.
you are. Yes.
Yeah. Did you come to visit New Mexico?
I wrote that shortly after we were in New Mexico. Yes. Um, the exercise, the thought experiment, the thought exercise is not original with me. I was a participant in a group, oh, maybe 20 years ago, when a hospice chaplain did a similar type exercise. I adapted it for use in my own teaching and my own talks, um, and thought it was so informative to start with the that what trying to figure out what might it feel like to be that dying person. Well, the dying people know what it feels like because they're there, but it's a little hard for those of us who are not in that situation. So what this exercise does is it takes the one thing that we have in common with the dying, and that is that we understand loss. We all lose things every day. Sometimes they're little things like our phone for 10 minutes, or sometimes they're big things like your mother. Um, but one thing that happens with the dying is that they lose everything. And so this exercise takes a person from the idea of being a healthy person to finding, when I did it in as an exercise in a talk, it was finding the lump in your neck in the shower. But because I just had kind of briefly fallen in love with the high desert in New Mexico, we started at the Grand Canyon of the Rio Grande. And seeing a little jaundice in your eyes, and then going from there to losing everything. Um, I found that emotionally powerful. And one of the reasons that I included that is that much of the reasons that we don't address our mortality and our dying in this country is that we're afraid of it, is it's an emotion. And I'm not sure that we're afraid of the death. I think we might be partly afraid of the feelings, afraid of the fear, afraid of the suffering, afraid of the loneliness, afraid of the anger. And and I'm convinced that if you experience a little bit of that ahead of time, it probably makes it easier. And to realize I can do this. I can do this. I know I got to do this, and I can do this. Yeah.
I thought it was interesting as part of that thought experiment when the person that you are imagining
You
yourself
make
to
yourself to
be
be.
um, gets toward the end of the cancer treatment, and then they say, "Oh, we're going to turn you over to palliative care," and you're thinking, "Why didn't you mention this sooner?" And I've heard other um, end of life doctors saying, "Yeah, palliative care needs to be
Yeah.
involved much earlier." What do you think about what's going on with the medical field and palliative care?
Well, everything's all messed up right now because of the pandemic, but it is a growing thing. There's an exciting thing that's happening in palliative care. Um, One of the things that that those of us in the field would hope is that we could get more primary palliative care going for more docs and nurse practitioners and physicians assistants to use the concept of palliative care earlier in their offices. I think one of the biggest things that palliative care offers is the conversation. Um, and in the hospital setting, that's one of the most common reasons for consultation is because the specialists, the other hospitalists have got so much other stuff to do, and haven't learned the skill of the conversation, and that palliative care specialists are able to have those conversations. I think it's vital. One thing that's very positive is that the American Society of Clinical Oncology, the national professional organization of cancer specialists, now has a position statement that for people with advanced cancers, a palliative care consultation is part of the recommended treatment. It's not even just a consider; it's part of the recommendation. I think that's tremendous. Yeah.
That's encouraging. That's encouraging. So, toward the end of the book, you talk about finding meaning in our deaths, and you bring up the book of Ecclesiastes from the Bible. I love that section. It's
Yeah.
got some great wisdom, and you know, the repetition of vanity, vanity, all is vanity, and there's nothing new under the sun.
Right.
Um, what would you say to people facing their deaths about finding meaning?
I think that if I were going to put it in a nutshell, it would be to look within and to be open to possibility. Um, One thing that I hear from the hospice chaplains is that those who are, the more sure you are right, the more you suffer, because being open to possibility, when you find out that you've got questions and what you know as the answers to life aren't answering those questions, it can be quite painful. Um, so I would suggest being open, which is a little scary to do, which is another reason we need to be doing it earlier. Um, but also look within and find that inner peace because it's there. It's there. Um, and I don't know. One thing that this has taught me is uh, the philosophers who have worked and struggled and written for finding some great meaning to life probably were looking in the wrong place, because I think the meaning has to be our own and it may be individual. I think it likely is individual. Um, I hope we do that all throughout our lives. I mean, I'm not a very good contemplative, but I think uh, that's a good way to start. I guess I said I was going to do that as a short answer to say look within, and then I've talked for 5 minutes, so it's time for me to shut up.
That's okay. So, in a nutshell, if someone did want to die with ease, your
Yes.
recommendations would be what?
Plan for it. Um, uh, get as much done ahead of time as you can. I love your message about getting your advance directives done, getting your funeral planned, have your conversations, do that kind of stuff, because that will put you in touch with some of the other stuff. Having the real conversations with your family or your decision maker gets you in touch with that emotional level, and then pay attention to that emotional level, and work with it. And it's not scary. It doesn't have to. Well, it's scary before you start, but it's not scary once you're doing it. You find out, yeah, this is stuff I didn't want to think about, but it is. It's all about who we are as human beings. Yeah,
And like I like to say, just like talking about sex won't make you pregnant, talking about funerals and end of life issues won't make you dead.
that's right.
and your family will benefit from the conversation.
Absolutely, absolutely.
The book is Dying with Ease by Dr. Jeff Spiess. Wonderful to talk to you today. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Gail.
We have a link to the book on Amazon in the description below, so I hope you'll check that out. And please like and subscribe to this channel for more great books to die for, interviews, and recommendations. Thanks for joining us.